this episode, we look at our Friday night Hockey East matchup on NESN between number 3 BU and UConn. We go around Hockey East with some key men's and women's matchups in the conference this week, and we reveal our Hockey East NESN broadcast schedule. That's all coming up next on This Week in Hockey East.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Hockey East. Great to be back with you, along with Bridget Prue. I'm Eric Galanti. Our Friday night Hockey East game takes us to Agganis Arena, where we get to see the BU Terriers kick off their Hockey East regular season schedule as they take on a really solid offensive UConn team to start the season. It should be a great game on Friday night. Bridget, let's start with the Terriers and what we've seen so far.
Yeah, so far this season, BU has 2 games under their belt and are off to a pretty hot start so far. Wins over Holy Cross and Union, both at Agganis, and their homestand continues on Friday night. A question going into the season was, how will BU replace the scoring of Macklin Celebrini? Well, right now they're doing it by committee and getting some help from freshmen. So far through 2 games, BU has scored 9 goals from 6 different goal scorers, and freshmen Cole Eiserman and Alex Zetterberg led the way with 2 goals, as well as junior Ryan Green getting 2 goals as well. So you're seeing that top to bottom scoring starting to happen, things spreading out. We mentioned last week Cole Eiserman. We expect him to have a good season, and maybe he's the leading goal scorer for BU this year, while he's already looked pretty good in creating some chemistry with some former teammates that he used to play with on the U.S. National Development Program. And then to look a little bit further into the lineup, you can't forget about the Hudson brothers. No, we're not talking about Lane Hudson because he graduated, and by the way, he's already got 4 assists with the Montreal Canadiens in 4 games this season. But his brothers Quinn Hudson and Cole Hudson on the team this year. Quinn leading the team with 4 assists, and freshman defenseman Cole Hudson assisting on one of Eiserman's goals this season. And in net, it's the same for BU this year. Mathieu Caron, strong in net to start the season, a 17-save first period against Union, and he had a kind of a little bit of a record this past weekend. No starter in Division I men's hockey had a better save percentage than Mathieu Caron this past weekend. He stopped 36 of 37 shots, a .973% save percentage in this weekend's game against Union.
Yeah, it's really interesting when, last year we were talking about Karan coming in from Brown. What was he going to be? Now it's year 2. It's a strength of this BU team, having him back there. And really because of how young BU is defensively. It's not so much that it's a negative. It's just going to take time for this defense to gel together. And Jay Pandolfo said as much. You mentioned the number of saves Karan made in the first period against Union. That's because BU gave way too many shots in that first period. And that's not me saying that. That's Jay Pandolfo saying that in his post-game press conference. BU's defense, you have Braden Engum, who came in as a transfer from UMass Lowell as a grad transfer. He had 114 career games played going into this season. The other 6 defensemen on BU's roster combined had 124 games played before this season. So they're really young back there. It's going to take a little bit of time, but the fact that you have such a veteran in Karan is huge for this Terriers team. And it's going to be important against UConn, who all of a sudden, where'd this offensive juggernaut come from in the UConn Huskies? If you watched our show at all last year, I can't tell you how many times we started a UConn conversation with, boy, they're generating. It's got to be coming here soon. And they just couldn't finish. And then finally, the last 2 or 3 games of the season, you saw them start to finish a little bit. Well, 4 games into the year, they had 10 goals the opening weekend against Colgate. That's more goals than they had than any 2-game stretch all year last year. They have 16 goals so far this year in their 4 games played. That's more goals than they had in any 4-game stretch last season. So the ice bus is starting to finish, and that was a huge point of emphasis in the offseason for Mike Cavanaugh and company, and it's going to be huge to see early this year. Another way to talk about it, shooting percentage isn't a perfect stat in college hockey because it doesn't give you the context of, how many high danger chances are there, where the shots are coming from, and different things. So you can only use it so much. But just as an example, UConn last season, while they were top 20 in shots, they were 59th nationally in shooting percentage. Literally the amount of shots that you take that go in, just 8.1%. This year, again, only 4 games into the season, 36 shots per game. That's 3rd best in Hockey East. And their shooting percentage is up at 11% now, which is tied for 5th among teams that have played more than 2 games. So they are finding the back of the net. And if you want to talk about, is shooting percentage a good stat to use? Well, just for argument's sake, the top 5 teams in shooting percentage last year, Denver, BC, BU, North Dakota, Cornell. So it means something, right? And so it's big to see UConn finding the back of the net. And they haven't done it on the power play so far. They have not been good on the power play so far. They're just 1 for 17. So they're winning 5-on-5. Here's another stat for you. And I already can hear our Hockey's commissioner, Steve Metcalf, telling me enough with the stats, but I'm giving you one more. UConn so far this year has the best ratio of goals scored to goals allowed at even strength of any team that's played more than 2 games this year. So they've been very good 5-on-5. Jake Richard's been really good so far. 4 goals and 2 assists, 6th-round pick a couple of years ago. Can a guy like Jake Percival keep taking the jump? 3 goals, 5 points so far this year. That's already a quarter of the way to his career goal scoring total from last year. There's a bunch of different guys we could talk about for UConn. And the other one is Tyler Muslik's been really good in goal. Remember the transfer from UNH? He was hurt early last year for UNH. It just never really worked out there for the Wildcats, but he's been solid so far. 3 out of 4 games, 2 goals or fewer allowed, just 1 goal on Saturday on 14 saves. So we'll see if he can be that full-time guy as he's getting the opportunity for the UConn Huskies. Should be a good one on Friday. UConn and BU will have that, and we'll have plenty more coming up on this episode of This Week in Hockey East.
Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. I'm Bridget Prue alongside Eric Galanti, and we'll get you to our Saturday spotlight game between Holy Cross and Northeastern at 5 p.m. puck drop at Matthews. And Eric, first, let's look at what Holy Cross has been able to do this season.
Yeah, our first big This Week in Hockey East call of the week. Watch out for Holy Cross last week. We told you about it, and they beat Boston College for the first time in program history on Thursday. BC then won the game on Saturday at Conti, but a really solid start to the year. And the thing that stands out for Holy Cross, they're producing, they're scoring. They're the second highest scoring offense in Hockey East so far this year, only behind Providence. Holy Cross at 2.7 goals per game. That's obviously up from where they've been the last couple of years. We talked about Alexia Moreno a little bit last week, 2 goals and 2 assists so far. A couple of other players that have stood out for the Crusaders. Add Reagan Chadwick to that group, goals in 2 of her last 3 games. And then Emily Crovo has already exceeded her goal total from last year. She has 3 goals so far, including a goal in the game on Thursday. Now, 2 of those have been on the power play for her, so they've been pretty good on their special teams so far. And then on the back end, Brooke Larange has been very solid so far. Played 12 games each of the last 2 years, but this year, 3-2 record. She's already matched her career win total, 119 saves, 922 save percentage so far. She made 28 saves in the win Thursday, and then even notably 32 saves Saturday on the road in the game that Holy Cross lost at Boston College. So some real reasons for optimism for Holy Cross. And remember, they're not going to be afraid to go into Northeastern. Remember, last year, Holy Cross went into Northeastern and beat the Huskies in overtime last October. They've tied Northeastern a few times. They've been competitive in some of these games with the Huskies, so that certainly stands out for this Holy Cross team as they go and try to take on Northeastern, who's also off to a solid start this year.
Yeah, and to take a look into really who's been making the plays for Northeastern this year. They had a split weekend against BU last weekend. Friday night, I broadcast that game. It was a dominant effort by Northeastern. BU had Callie Shanahan in net, their leading goaltender. She struggled a little bit, partly because the defense didn't play that well out in front of her and allowed Northeastern to get a lot of movement, a lot of chances, a lot of penalties in that game as well. But to take a look at just how that weekend went for the Huskies, Paige Taborski got her first shutout of the season, a 4-0 win on Friday night. Then it flipped. BU won 4-0 on Saturday against Northeastern. So they split the weekend. It was Lisa Jansson in net, the freshman from Sweden, who took that loss against BU, her first action of her collegiate career. And I think something really important to spotlight and to watch out for in this Saturday matchup is going to be the top line for Northeastern. They were fast. They were moving the puck really well. And they have this dynamic where they have freshman Eloise Caron, senior Skylar Irving, and grad transfer Jaden Bogdan coming together after they've never played together before. And then through the first part of the season have looked really strong together. In particular, putting up points on the board, 19 points in their first 6 games together. And then on the back end, you look to the defense. huge veteran defensemen like Tori Mariano and Lily Jovetic have logged a lot of minutes for Northeastern. And that works as they start to get some of their younger defensemen more playing time, like Tuva Candel and Tristan Thompson getting in there. And Northeastern oftentimes will dress 7 defensemen, and they like to, and Coach Dave Flint likes to actually get everyone involved. So it's not like you have one person sitting. They will rotate around and rotate in. And then, like we mentioned, on the back end, Paige Dvorsky playing well so far. Got our first shutout of the season. 3-2 record, a 141 goals against average and a 948 save percentage, following in the footsteps of some of Northeastern's great goaltenders so far.
And as we take a look at our Jersey Mike sub above, Women's Player of the Week, and you mentioned her, Eloise Caron was really special for Northeastern last week.
Yeah, she was. She almost had a hat trick in Friday's game. She had a few beautiful plays that she made. She went glove side for her first goal. She scored on a breakaway, 5-hole for her second goal against Callie Shanahan against BU. And then she rang the crossbar with an empty net. That would have been a hat trick. It would have been the nicest empty net goal you'd ever seen, but it just missed. So she ends up with 2 goals in that game instead of her first career hat trick. And now she is the leading goal scorer in Hockey East with 4 goals and 7 points already.
We're looking forward to seeing her on Saturday. Remember, that's a 5 o'clock start on Saturday from Matthews Arena on Nesson, following the game Friday, as we talked about BU and UConn. That's the Nesson slate for the weekend, but there's still plenty more as we go around Hockey East when we come back, including a couple of crucial non-conference games between teams we saw in the NCAA tournament a year ago. That's coming up here on This Week in Hockey East. Welcome back. It's time to go around Hockey East, presented by Boston Harbor Hotel. Visit hockeyeastonline.com for your chance to win championship tickets and a 2-night stay at the Boston Harbor Hotel. Maine made the trip down to Boston last year for Hockey East Championship weekend. They have a big non-conference game, Bridget, against Quinnipiac coming up this weekend.
Yeah, 2 top 10 ranked teams in the USCHO.com poll this week. Number 7, Quinnipiac, playing number 10, Maine. And Maine has only played 1 regular season game so far. They won the only game against AIC on October 5th, 6-0. And then they kept things fresh by playing an exhibition game against Army last weekend. Now we're going into maybe their first real test of the season. And to take a look at where they got their scoring in that one game against AIC, like I mentioned, 6 goals, 2 from Taylor McCarr and 2 from Nolan Renwick, both against AIC. And Taylor McCarr coming in, the younger brother of Avs, Cale McCarr, transferred to Maine after 3 seasons with the UMass Minutemen. He could be a difference maker on this team this year for Maine. They already had some really great pieces. And then to bring in Taylor McCarr as a transfer, another layer to the offense, you already see him getting some of his production underway with the Black Bears. And to take a look in net, Alvin Bouya has the only start, 17 save shutout for the Black Bears. The 6'1" sophomore from Sweden played in 18 games last season when he split time with Victor Osman. He is our night shift all-academic standout of the week for that shutout in the first weekend of the season. We'll see if he can continue his success, which you have to assume a number 7 Quinnipiac team is going to come in and put up a little bit more of a barrage of shots on him. Like I mentioned, only 17 saves last week. Quinnipiac probably going to put up over 20 shots on this Maine Black Bears team. And to take a look at them, their only game so far this season was a 3-2 win over Penn State. So, like I mentioned, Eric, top 10 matchup, a good one to keep an eye on this weekend.
Yeah, it's so great how many of these non-conference matchups against really good teams early in the season. It's so great for college hockey fans. Another one is Northeastern going to the defending national champs, Denver, for 2 games this weekend. Don't forget Northeastern, who has just 1 game under their belt so far, win against Stonehill. They also beat Quinnipiac, by the way, in an exhibition this year. Northeastern, besides BC and BU, was about the hottest team in Hockey East down the stretch last year. After a 1-10 start in Hockey East play, remember, they finished 10-4-1 to end the year, including the Beanpot win that got themselves into the Hockey East quarterfinals. You know, I talked with Jerry Keefe a couple of weeks ago. Injuries were a huge part of that struggle early, but they've also still talked about getting off to a better start, certainly this year. Key losses for this group, we know that, but the big guy coming back is Jax Williams. A wonderful year. He might have been the best player in Hockey East from Thanksgiving through Beanpot last year, and they're going to try to get that consistency out of him all year long. One of the big additions that's going to help Williams is Christophe Tellier, coming in from Quinnipiac, who we've talked a lot about in this segment. Those two played together in juniors. So they've been on a line together early in the season. There's a lot of built-in chemistry between those two. Another key addition is Ryan McGuire coming in from Colgate. He's a center. Northeastern has to replace some of their centers this year. Remember how many faceoffs Justin Ritzkovian took in key spots for Northeastern over the last few years. Well, Ryan McGuire comes in. He was at 58% on the faceoff last year for Colgate. So that's a big addition to have. Really excited to see what we see from Joe Connor, who's gotten power play time early in the season. A couple of other key guys. And we haven't even mentioned Cam Whitehead, who, again, might have been the best goalie in Hockey East from Thanksgiving on last season. So it's a really good team, but it's a really good Denver team as well. Preseason number one. And they bring back the most goals of any team in the country, the most points of any team in the country, and Matt Davis. So tough sledding for Northeastern this weekend up at Denver.
As we get closer to puck drop, we'll take a deeper look into our matchups around Hockey East this weekend. And Eric, first take us through a women's matchup between Boston College and Merrimack.
Yeah, just one game this weekend between these two at Merrimack on Saturday. What an impressive bounce back weekend for the Merrimack Warriors. They go up to Vermont and win a pair of games 3-2. Game one, Merrimack built a 3-0 lead into the third period. And then in game two, Merrimack converted 2 power play goals and allowed only 14 shots. They won in different ways. Rachel Bjorgens really stood out so far. She scored in both games over the weekend, a grad transfer from St. Lawrence. And then, really nice weekend. We're going to talk about goalies who stepped into maybe bigger roles this weekend for these two teams. How about Margot Favre, who comes in to the BU game a couple of weeks ago, made 12 saves in relief, and then got both starts this week and got 2 wins for Merrimack, notably made 26 saves in the game on Friday. And as we said, that's sort of a jumping off point for BC, because where do they go in goal with Bailey Calloway playing really good? Her second career start, she gets a win over Holy Cross, made 23 saves, only 1 goal allowed. For Boston College, still trying to find it a little bit early in the season. They did have a nice bounce back win on Saturday after the loss Thursday to Holy Cross. Nice start to the year for Abby Newhook, and that might be the most positive sign for the Eagles. 3 goals and an assist in her first 4 games in the year. Remember, last season her goals were a little bit down last year, closer to 10. So we'll see if she can kind of bounce back a little bit. She had 19 goals as a sophomore. She's well on her way to that pace. Still plenty of time early in the season, but it's a key game because remember, BC had Wisconsin earlier. Now they'll have Clarkson come in next weekend. So it's important for them to get this one, build some confidence. Additionally, 5 of their first 6 Hockey East games are on the road. So a big one on the road against Merrimack on Saturday.
And an additional men's game to keep an eye on this weekend. Both Merrimack and UNH start their conference play against each other this weekend. Just one matchup on Friday night. And both teams really haven't played too much this year. UNH has 1 win so far against Bentley, which was a non-conference matchup. Nick Ring scoring the overtime game-winning goal in what was a pretty tight game between those two teams. And Merrimack 1-2 so far with the loss to Stonehill and a split weekend against Minnesota State and Mankato. So this one going to be back in Massachusetts, Merrimack at home, hosting UNH for another game to keep an eye on. Like we mentioned, BU, probably the big game of the week, but UNH Merrimack starting conference play as well.
Yeah, it's great to see conference action getting going. UNH is really interesting because, they lose their goalies from last year a little bit late in the process. And how do they, go about finding who that guy is in goal? Because the rest of the group, they bring back a lot from last year's team that was so close and had one of the best years for UNH in a little while. So it should be interesting. And that's a nice win going out to Mankato for Merrimack and getting a split out there. So that should be a good conference matchup between those two. One more segment to go. When we come back, we'll take some short shifts here on This Week in Hockey East. Welcome back to This Week in Hockey East. It's time to take some short shifts with the Shift Group, helping elite athletes and veterans become elite sales professionals. Bridget, what stands out to you this week?
Well, I wanted to spotlight a non-conference matchup between Providence College and Arizona State. PC back at Schneider for their home opener this weekend. 2 games, both of them at 7 o'clock. And the Friars are coming in off a 5-2 loss to number 6 North Dakota. Not an easy way to start the season, taking your longest road trip and playing one of the top-ranked teams in the country. Well, they come back home now. They only put up 2 goals last weekend. Freshman Braden Clark and sophomore Hudson Malinowski getting those 2 goals. They would like to get more scoring from some of those new freshmen, those high round draft picks underway for the Friars. And Philip Svedback in net for that loss, 26 saves, allowing 4 goals. They expect him to have another good season this year. So against Arizona State, important to work on a few things that they weren't able to do in this past matchup against number 6 North Dakota. Arizona State receiving votes this week, and they'd like to continue to crack the rankings. They're just outside that top 20, with the Friars trying to improve from the number 14 ranking.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what Providence is going to do in goal this year. You talk about Philip Svedback, Bruins prospect, and I think they still think very highly of him, but they also bring in Zachary Borgiel. Maybe it's a situation where Svedback doesn't have to play every single game. But Nate Lehman's been very honest when evaluating his program. And this isn't even just conversation you might have as a broadcaster where a coach tells you something. He's been very open about this. He's spoke about it on his radio show. Whoever talks to him, 920 save percentage. That's what we need. 920 save percentage. However we get there, doesn't matter. 920. That's what we need to be successful. Remember, Providence just missed the NCAA tournament last year. Speaking of, I just want, this is our second show. We already had one, and this is a huge piece of our Hockey East and NESN partnership this year. But the Hockey East schedule came out of games that are going to be on NESN. We're so excited to bring this to you, leading into our Friday night Hockey East game on NESN every week, in addition to our show. But in addition to the regular season games, a couple of exciting announcements. Number one, the return of flex scheduling at the end of the year, so we can make sure we're bringing you the most important games down the stretch of the season in February. So we'll be able to pick those games a little bit later on in the year. And then extensive coverage of both the women's and the men's Hockey East tournament, more coverage than we've ever had before of this tournament. So that's really exciting, and we can't wait to bring it to you all year long.
Well, we want to thank you all for joining us. Up next, it's BU and UConn. Eric Galanti and Jim Connolly have the call. Stay tuned for Friday Night Hockey East on NESN.